everyone, I'm Stephanie Arell, and today I want to talk about a word, that word being betrayal, and spend some time unpacking and analyzing it from a direction that might be a little bit unusual for some of you. And I'm inspired to do this for a couple of reasons, because thinking about in my own relationship for me with my husband, but really it can be with any intimate relationship, friendships or otherwise. And I guess I can think of two friendships that are kind of changing in my life right now, to think about what betrayal means in all of these contexts. And I come to that because I do believe that people are human, and it is likely that everyone in our lives will do some act that is hurtful to us, whether or not that is to us or independent of us. And that's kind of where I want to locate betrayal, how we interpret it when it's something that is not actually to us, but feels like it's to us. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's play around with that kind of idea for a minute and start where I'm starting from. So I had a student recently who did a project on betrayal in relationship to sexuality, but specifically related to looking at people who were involved on internet use that felt like a betrayal within a relationship, and I'll end that there. And I encouraged the student to think about the word betrayal and what that meant. And where my perspective originally came from was from reading Julia Kristeva, who is my all-time favorite female philosopher, writer, everything in my whole life world. So this is her book with her husband who recently passed away, but this is called Marriage as a Fine Art. And then this is a new book that she wrote. This is in French, so if you read French, you could read it. It has not been translated into English, but there are a lot of essays that I think are in English that are in this book or like it. And I assume at some point this will be translated into English, which just has to do with like a feminine ethics. So I've just started reading this one and want to give her a shout out. But in the book on Marriage as a Fine Art, she establishes betrayal as something very particular, and so I'd like to read that to you. So she says, to feel betrayed implies zero self-confidence, a narcissism so battered that the slightest affirmation of the other person's individuality is felt as a crippling blow. The least mosquito bite has the impact of a nuclear bomb. Now, that's a pretty big statement that we could probably spend a whole video unpacking. And some of you may disagree or agree with my interpretation of it on this platform in a way that's not super nuanced. But what I think part of what she's trying to say is that when someone else engages in or performs an act that feels like some threat or some injury to us, but it's not directly to us, right? So it happens outside, we're not there, it's away from us, it's their own choice of behavior, but it's not, and doesn't infringe on our body. It's no violence to us emotionally, it's no violence to us in a psychological way, like someone name calling. It's no effect, someone's not bashing you on social media, it's not to you, so to speak. Okay, so they engage in an act we don't agree with. Maybe it's bothersome, we don't like it, but we interpret it as something to us. And then this act, which for someone else may seem like nothing, to us knocks us over. Okay, so we're operating in this framework, as I just said, of perceiving that something is done to us. I want us to think about betrayal in that framework. Betrayal implies or implicates the concept of trust. So this has to be happening within a relationship where we trust people. And actually, I want to give a little bit of a deviation because I don't think that what I'm about to say in this conversation applies to children or people who are in situations where there is a condition of powerlessness. I think then the conversation has to responsibly shift to the most vulnerable person. So I'm literally talking more about two adults in a relationship who have full agency, or they have possession of their own agency. That's an important under foundation to operate from. Again, it deals with trust. When people use the word betrayal, say, I feel betrayed, they generally are implying that they trusted somebody to be a particular way within the confines of the relationship that may have been established or not established. And the person, this other person, does something that undermines the trust. And then the next step, once trust is experienced as being undermined, is this person, say me in this exchange, feels betrayed. And in that feeling, there is the implication that there is something done to them, or that could be interpreted as being a victim. I have been wronged. I am the victim. The discourse will operate, even if that word isn't used, around that kind of thematic. I do have a video that's on the drama triangle by Karpman, which I talk about as a trauma triangle about victim, perpetrator, and rescuer. And it might be important for some of you, if you don't understand what I'm saying, with the idea of the problem of identifying as a victim, and especially in a situation like this, it might be useful to watch that video. I really encourage people to move away from that kind of identification. And I especially think that's important in this kind of exchange, because there literally isn't anything that's been done to you. And it's very important, I think, to start to make those delineations, because there are situations in which people are victimized. And when we neuter that word to be something that's more globalized, it becomes problematic to me. Backing up to, okay, I feel like I've been betrayed if I say that, if some friend or a partner, if a partner engages in infidelity, if a friend tells something that they weren't supposed to tell, and then it feels like it's being done to me, right? What happens that people enter into sometimes is a vortex now. All right, it's been done to me. There might be a reflection on, what did I do wrong? There might be a reflection on, my world is kind of tumbling apart because I can't trust in this person that I previously trusted in. The groundedness that someone's able to maintain may feel disturbed. The window of tolerance, which I've talked before in another video, which has to do with our levels of arousal, like we're just completely fragmented, hyper irritable, so that would be considered hypoarousal. All of these things start to transpire, and it depends on the personality, and it depends on the history very much of other relationships, including with parents, how someone's going to adapt or react to the experience of a broken trust, which again may get articulated as betrayal, and which I am trying to kind of disrupt a little bit. What I've set up then are two conditions of the person that has experienced themselves as having been done something to. One condition relates to experiencing oneself as a victim, which inherently, in my opinion, attaches to the concept that I am powerless, I have no agency, what can I do now? Which has legs in the concept of self-doubt. And there's probably more than two, but I'm just want to locate two for the simpleness of talking on YouTube. The other experience being closer to self-worth. Why is this happening to me? Why do I never find anybody who loves me? Why do I pick friends that transgress? What's wrong with me that somebody would want to sleep with someone else? Am I not good enough? So these are the two discourses. What happens when we're in these spaces is that the ability to suture or get out of the relationship, if one makes a decision that this actually isn't helpful, and that's not always the case. And I think that we have to keep that open. Like, it's all on the individual to kind of say, is there room here now for me to think about working on my own self-worth? And that may lead to suturing the relationship, and that may mean saying, wow, if my self-worth were a little bit higher, I wouldn't even want to be in this engagement. So we're left with working on self-worth and self-doubt. So let's start with self-worth. Lowered self-worth usually relates to the concept of shame and wanting to withdraw from others, from personal connections, wanting to cover up who we really are. It might also be manifested in relationship to being violently angry over what somebody's done as a protective mechanism. It may not feel like a protective mechanism. It may feel as if it's justified, but usually higher responses of anger will have some kind of connection to our own experiences of shame and low self-worth. And all of this, remember, I'm putting within the framework or in the dynamic of having experienced or articulating having experienced the idea of being betrayed. And so before we kind of interpret betrayal or say somebody's done something wrong to us, I think it's beholden on us to say, okay, where is my level of self-worth? So that I can actually be in a position to make a decision to adjudicate, yes, this is someone I want to continue to engage with, or you know what? No, I can't trust this person, so I have to have protective mechanisms in my relationship with them, period. Both things are decent choices depending on what the context is. But I really believe that we can't get to that position if we're not inherently being able to connect with and be very grounded in our self-worth and eliminate self-doubt to whatever extent that's possible. Thinking about increasing self-worth starts with mitigating shame. 2 ways we can mitigate shame: engage in laughter, be around people who make us laugh, find things that make us laugh, really let it out, really laugh. If something small, embarrassing happens to you, find a way to make it funny. Create jokes, be light, authentically engage in experiences of laughter, ideally with other people. Second, eye contact. If you can find somebody with whom you feel you can be vulnerable with, really truly vulnerable, look at them in the eyes and be with them looking at them in the eyes. That's a sure way to mitigate the shame experience. Have self-compassion and really love yourself. That is a real tough thing to understand and live into. And I have a video on parts of what it means to experience self-love. And I think we could have a whole YouTube station on self-love. Some examples of self-love for me would be finding ways that really regulate your nervous system. And, you know, for me today, I was tired before I got on the video. And so I put on something soft and light pink and some soft pants. And I'm very comfortable now talking to you. And that's an act of self-love or self-compassion. I actually have had some physical issues lately and have been working in the realm of somatics. And so one of the behaviors that I engage in is, you know, letting my body know it's had a tough time, and giving my body some compassion and literally talking to parts of my body. That's another act of loving kindness towards oneself. I think exposing oneself to nature is another way of engaging in self-love, whether that's sitting on a balcony and having a coffee with a friend, or that's taking a walk in a park, or taking a look at water. I even think that because stress does so much to our face and our head and our vision and makes us tight, that having experiences where we can see far away, that's both symbolically and literally ways of nurturing ourselves, because it's just making things so broad and open. Another way of mitigating self-worth is by more cognitive, and that's by self-talk. You've probably heard of this before. It's not really my favorite method. I like to do things that are more intrinsically physical, and cognitive work does help people. And that's doing really positive messaging to the self. So to change the way that we think about things. And I recently was actually watching a talk, and I should remember the name of this woman, but one of the things that she said was so helpful about changing messaging to ourselves was to experiment with thinking about something the opposite way we normally would think about it. And that gives us this different perspective. How I would translate that into thinking about self-worth is if we have some doubt that we are not worthy enough, if there's anything that we say like, oh, I could never do that, or no, I'm not good enough for that, that we actually just kind of flip that script and say, oh yeah, I would totally do that. And just see how it feels to say, I would bungee jump off the side of a building. I wouldn't do that. But if I say that, what is the experience of kind of playing with the complete opposite of what I think? And how does that help me understand myself better, which I think self-understanding is such a huge component of self-worth. Self-doubt, different than self-worth. It's some uncertainty of your belief or your opinion, and this would be in your own belief in your own capacities. Tricky. It still relates to self-worth, I would say. Having high self-doubt usually means you're going to have a low self-worth. But the method is a little different, I think, in terms of addressing self-doubt. They overlap. Number one, generally, if we have high self-doubt, there is some missing piece of our own integrity. And integrity is made of a couple of different things, but I'll land on two. One, I think, is doing things that match your values consistently. And two is trusting yourself to do things, whether or not, well, ideally they match to your values, but they may be things that are just minor habits, like brushing your teeth every day, which may or may not be easily aligned with a particular value. But if the value is health, then brushing your teeth every day is a habit that aligns with that value. I'll give you two little anecdotes to understand what I mean by those. I'm a huge Survivor fan. People that walk into that game and say, this is how I'm gonna play because these are my values, and they consistently play that way, are people that have a pretty good belief in themselves, which would mitigate self-doubt. And they usually play pretty well because they stick to a particular method and they stay aligned with that method. Generally, those happen to be people that say they have high integrity. Now, that's a game on TV, so I don't want to say here's the end all be all, but it's something to think about in terms of here's my integrity, this is how I'm going to play, and I'm going to stay consistent with it. That's the kind of behavior pattern that you want to see in somebody who doesn't have a lot of self-doubt. Aspect number two is, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z every day, and then you consistently do those things. That builds integrity, which then would mitigate self-doubt. When we engage in these actions and we consistently do them, even when we don't feel like it, and this can be, I'm going to get up every morning at 5 o'clock. When you actually do that, when you say it, it feels great, right? So you pick a behavior and consistently do it, and it feels good. And it can be so small because as you do those things, it creates this sort of, trust in yourself, belief in yourself, uncertainty kind of dissipates, and that has growing potential into so many areas of your life. The next I would say is that getting feedback from other people can be helpful. Again, that gets back to trust, because it would be good to get feedback from people that you trust, or people that you respect very much, and kind of ask them, what do you see? What kind of things can I work on? And that can help because it can give you a realistic picture of who you are. And then if there are aspects of those things about which you have self-doubt, to create small habits or patterns that can help mitigate those. I sound maybe far from betrayal, and I'm not sure how much I can tell you in a YouTube video that are gonna make these things seem very close to each other. I will say a couple things. One, focusing on yourself, your own self-worth, your own belief in yourself. If you're under stress of feeling as if your trust has been betrayed, will help you have a perspective to make decisions about that in a way that's not from a position of victimhood. And that can only be a positive thing. Secondly, when you spend time working on your self-worth and your belief in yourself, what someone else does that's not to you, no violation to your body or your psyche directly, their behavior becomes more easily separated from who you are as a person. So what they choose to do has nothing to do with you, really. And, I had a therapist once when I was younger who used to say to me, what those people do, even what they say about you, is none of your business. And that's a thing that I keep in mind. Like, it's none of my business. If these people choose to do X, Y, and Z, none of my business. And I go about my merry way working on myself. And I'm not going to say that that's an easy choice to make all of the time, because things can be hurtful and they may have nothing to do with me. I think about that in terms of infidelity. I think about that in terms of when a friend does something that is actually hurtful to my career, which has happened, when somebody disappears on me, which has happened multiple times, both for men and women. Doesn't really have anything to do with me. Now, I may go, okay, how did I contribute to this dynamic? That's how I get rid of self-doubt. Look at it, work on it, see where I want to grow in the situation, deal with the feelings of loss that come out of whatever situation's been presented in front of me. But I have to work from me, not what am I going to say to them, what am I going to do with them, well, what do I need to do with me? And that's the position from which I start to build self-worth. I start to mitigate or get rid of self-doubt, and I start to reconstruct what it means to say betrayed. Thanks.